Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a massively complex and absolutely crucial ecosystem, road safety in India. It's really easy to just point a finger at the person behind the wheel when a traffic accident happens. But the truth? Well, it's always a lot more layered than that. In this Explainer, we're going to break down the cascading failures that can turn a simple, everyday commute into a high-risk environment. We'll be looking really closely at the whole human versus system dynamic playing out on Indian roads.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the human element, the human error epidemic, unlicensed driving, and overloaded vehicles. After that, we'll pivot over to the system itself, the infrastructure deficit, and finally, protecting vulnerable road users. Okay, let's dive straight into Section 1, the human error epidemic. We're talking distracted, drunk, and speeding drivers. We've all seen this, right? People completely engrossed in their cell phones while navigating traffic. Distracted driving is this pervasive, everyday hazard that literally cuts across all vehicle types. It doesn't matter if you have the heavy steel cage of a car around you, or if you're trying to balance on two wheels in dense traffic. Looking away for even a couple of seconds can just be totally catastrophic. And because this behavior is so incredibly dangerous, it's actually strictly penalized. Under the Motor Vehicles Act, using a mobile phone in any form, whether you're calling, texting, or, just scrolling, triggers strict legal penalties under Sections 177 and 184. The legal system totally recognizes that human attention is a finite resource, and dividing it when you're behind the wheel is a direct threat to public safety. Shifting gears from distraction to impairment, let's talk about drunk driving. If you look at global comparisons, you have countries like South Africa up at a staggering 58% of road accident deaths involving alcohol, and Canada at 34%. Now, India sits at 5%. And sure, 5% might seem comparatively low when you just look at the raw percentages, but you really have to remember the sheer scale of India's population and traffic volume. That 5%, it represents a massive, tragic number of completely preventable fatalities caused by the choice to drive drunk. Now, what's really interesting about speeding is that we often picture these crazy race car speeds, right? But here's a wild stat from 2021. A massive 58% of all overspeeding e-chalents were actually issued for vehicles traveling between just 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. So it's not always the extreme outliers causing the issues. It's actually this mundane, moderate overspeeding in areas where the infrastructure and the presence of pedestrians demand a much, much slower pace. Moving right along to Section 2, unlicensed and underage driving. Seriously, who is actually behind the wheel? It's an image that's probably familiar to a lot of us. Underage, uniform-clad school kids precariously balanced on a single scooter, weaving through larger traffic. It perfectly and terrifyingly illustrates a highly dangerous but all too common reality on the roads. We're talking about young people without formal training, without a license, and honestly, without the mature risk assessment skills you need to safely navigate dense, unpredictable traffic. And the data completely backs up just how severe this issue is. If we break down road accidents by license type, it gets pretty alarming. While nearly 80% do have a valid license, over 10% of accidents involve someone driving entirely without a valid license. When you add in the 7% who only hold a learner's permit plus the unknown cases, you suddenly realize that roughly 1 in 5 accidents involves a driver who literally hasn't fully proven their competence to a licensing authority. That's huge. All right, Section 3, vehicles pushed beyond capacity. Overloading the limits. This is another thing you see all the time. A massive truck stacked impossibly high with cargo, practically leaning over, or a small three-wheeler that's just absurdly swamped in goods, like a rolling hazard of coconuts. It really illustrates the sheer scale of vehicle overloading. You see, every single vehicle is engineered with a specific center of gravity and a specific braking capacity. When you overload them like this, you are completely compromising the vehicle's physics. It makes it nearly impossible to stop safely or navigate a simple turn. And unfortunately, this brilliantly, or rather tragically, illustrates the fatal consequences of those altered physics. An overloaded truck completely tipping over and crushing a smaller car beneath it. The results of overloading are immediate and they are undeniable. That massive truck's instability didn't just put the truck driver at risk. It became a deadly, unavoidable hazard for the smaller vehicles that just happened to be sharing the road with it at the wrong time. So we focused a lot on human choices up to this point, right? Distractions, speeding, overloading. But I want to pivot for a second and ask a really crucial question. What happens when the driver is totally sober, alert, licensed, and driving a perfectly safe vehicle, but the environment itself fails them?
That brings us to Section 4,
the infrastructure deficit, when the road itself is the hazard.
To really understand infrastructure failure, we need to contrast two separate things: poor geometrics versus poor maintenance. Poor geometrics means the road was built inherently dangerous from day one. Think fundamental design flaws, blind curves, or unnaturally tight winding paths. Poor maintenance, on the other hand, means a road that might have been designed perfectly well but has become a total hazard through neglect over time. Unpatched potholes, muddy tracks, that kind of thing. Let's look at both. First up, poor structural geometrics. Imagine sharply winding, elevated roads and completely blind curves. A road designed like this demands extreme, sustained caution from drivers at all times. If the banking of the curve is off by just a tiny bit, or if your line of sight is blocked by the terrain, the infrastructure is basically setting a trap for you. It forces the driver to be absolutely perfect. And as we know from earlier, humans are rarely perfect. Then you have poor maintenance. We're talking about roads completely swallowed by mud and water, or stretches of asphalt just devastated by deep, jagged potholes. And listen, this isn't just an annoyance. These conditions actively damage vehicles, they blow out tires, and they literally strip drivers of their steering and braking control. When you swerve to avoid a massive crater in the road, you're often swerving directly into oncoming traffic. And compounding all of these infrastructure flaws is just the sheer volume of vehicles on the road today, which leads to massive traffic congestion. When roads simply aren't designed to handle modern vehicle loads, you get pure gridlock. This severe congestion creates highly unpredictable driving conditions and breeds immense driver frustration. And guess what frustration leads to? Exactly, the erratic and unsafe human behaviors we discussed back in Section 1. The system and the human totally feed into each other.
Finally, Section 5, protecting vulnerable road users, the human toll of the system. So the crucial point is this. When a speeding car hits a pothole and loses control, who really pays the price? It's the pedestrians, the cyclists, the people on two-wheelers. They are the most exposed elements in traffic, with absolutely zero physical protection. No airbags, no heavy steel frame, no crumple zones to save them against the colliding forces of the overloaded trucks and speeding cars we've been talking about.
Ultimately, seems like kids safely utilizing a monitored crosswalk underscore exactly what is at stake here. This is who relies on us getting road safety right. The goal of analyzing all this licensing data, infrastructure geometrics, and overloading limits, it isn't just to sit here and talk about numbers. It's to ensure that the environment is actually safe enough for kids to just simply walk to school. Which leaves us with one final provocative question for you to chew on. Will correcting human behavior, like cracking down on drunk driving and speeding, or fixing the systemic infrastructure, like engineering better curves and actually maintaining the roads, ultimately save more lives? The reality is it's a deeply intertwined ecosystem. Fixing one absolutely requires addressing the other. I really hope this explainer has given you a clearer, more structured understanding of the incredibly complex challenges on our roads. Thank you so much for learning with us today, and keep asking the big questions.